I look back, and all I see are memories distorted by time. But one thing never fades from my mind: the sound of my sister's cry, a cry that, even now, after so many years, still echoes in my soul. It was the last farewell I heard from her before fate separated us forever. No matter how many years I have, or how many things I've lived through since then, that moment, that sound, never ceases to haunt me. The pain of losing someone you love is a wound that time never fully heals, and over the years, her image and the sound of her cry followed me like shadows. Today, I tell this story, not just to remember, but to try to understand what happened, because to this day, I feel as if a part of me stayed there on that plantation, in that last look, in that last goodbye. Life on the plantation was a daily struggle for survival, but it was also marked by the silent hope of one day finding a freedom that seemed distant and unreachable. I was just a child when I first felt the weight of hard work, callous hands, and the constant pain that never passed. Each day was a repetition of the last, but there was always something new that emerged. The smell of the damp earth in the morning, the sound of bare feet hitting the hot ground, and the constant presence of a fear that could not be named but followed us like a shadow. The days on the plantation began before the sun rose and only ended when it set, often without us having the right to rest. The work was relentless. We were all forced to carry impossible loads for our fragile bodies. When we weren't working in the fields, we were in the woods, chopping wood or doing other equally exhausting tasks. The land we were forced to work was not ours, and every drop of sweat that fell from our bodies was like a reminder that our lives, our dignity, our freedom, all of it was in the hands of others. I remember a cotton field. My sister and I, still small, carried heavy sacks as large as ourselves, hoping that one day someone would tell us our work was done, that we could rest. But that never happened. The work never ended, and when night finally came, it felt as if the exhaustion became a second skin that trapped us. There was no time to relax, to play, to be children. Childhood had gone with the first whip, the first shout, the first order given without compassion. But the worst part wasn't the physical exhaustion. The worst part was what we couldn't see, the silent oppression that crushed us in an invisible way. Our bodies were marked, but our souls were too. Each day, each moment was a reminder that we were not masters of our own lives. We were not complete human beings. Our dignity was torn from us like a plant ripped from the earth, with no chance to grow again. But still, there was something they couldn't take: our resistance, our inner strength, the hope that perhaps, one day, we would be free amidst all the suffering. The small things became precious, the whispered words of my mother, the moments of silence where we could simply look at the sky, feel the wind on our faces, and imagine that one day we would be more than mere tools in the hands of others. Every shared glance, every touch from my sister, every conversation whispered at night, when everyone thought we were asleep, were like small pieces of humanity that reminded us that, despite everything, we were still human. In that place, where pain seemed constant, there was a deep yearning for something better. We didn't know what that something better was, but we felt it existed. I saw in those around us, in the other workers, the same look of exhaustion, but also the same fire inside them, a flame that didn't go out, no matter how hard the system tried to smother it. That flame was our resistance, our will to fight, our hope that one day, even if far off, freedom would come. It was hard to imagine the future. The present was too heavy for any dream. But somehow, there was something inside me, something that couldn't be destroyed, something that made me keep going, that gave me strength to endure another day, to wake up in the morning and do it all over again. I didn't know what would become of me, but I knew that the struggle for survival was tied to something bigger, something I couldn't fully understand at the time. Maybe it was the will to live, to resist, or maybe it was simply the need for something that was more than pain and suffering. Life on the plantation taught us to be strong, but it also taught us to be invisible. People looked at us and saw only hands to work, bodies to carry heavy burdens. Our dreams, our hopes, our pains were invisible to the eyes of others, but at the same time, we saw each other. We knew what we were, what we felt, and that's what kept us alive. It wasn't the land, nor the work, that defined us. It was our humanity, our ability to dream and resist, even in the most inhumane conditions. I didn't know what the future held for me, but something inside me, a silent force, told me that one day I would understand. I would understand that the struggle for freedom, for dignity, was a fight no one could erase. That our story, the story of all those who suffered like us, could never be forgotten, and even when it all seemed lost, there was something that told us to keep going, to never give up. Life on the plantation taught us many things, but the most important lesson was that our story, our resistance, our humanity could not be erased, no matter what happened. Asterisk, my mother always told me that, despite everything we lived through, our bond as a family was something no one could take from us. I grew up hearing those words, and maybe that's why, at that moment, when everything was torn from me, I still didn't understand the cruelty of it. I didn't understand how the system, with its inhumane logic, could undo what I believed was unbreakable. The family bond, my father, a man of few words, but with a deep gaze carrying the wisdom of life's hard battles, always warned me of reality. The land isn't ours, son. What truly belongs to us is what we keep inside, what no one can take away. But at that time, I could hardly understand the profound meaning of those words. He spoke of pain and resistance, of the silent fight, of the hope that still managed to remain despite the surrounding darkness. I clearly remember the day we were separated, the sound of whips, the shouts of people trying to cling to each other as if physical contact could heal the fear. That overwhelmed everything. But fear was there to stay, in everyone's eyes, like a shadow that didn't leave. I was with my sister when I saw the men come to separate us. They looked like ghosts, soulless men, but they were real, and as cruel as the pain they caused us. My sister's look, that look of terror and confusion, is still burned into my memory. The pain of separation was immense. No one ever explained the reason to me, nor why our existence was reduced to numbers, to names, to properties. I only knew that my sister and I were torn from what remained of our childhood, our innocence, and thrown into the abyss of uncertainty. Separation, in itself, was a mortal blow for any child. It doesn't just break the family bond, it breaks something deeper. Trust in life, trust in people, trust in yourself. At that moment, I didn't know if I could still trust anyone. My sister, with her big eyes full of questions with no answers, tried to hold on to me. She wanted me to say something that would stop it all, that I would tell her that the separation wouldn't be forever, that all of it wasn't real. But I couldn't. Fear and confusion overtook me to the point where I was unable to speak. I just held her hand for a moment, as if that touch could be the last thing keeping me anchored in a world that was falling apart. And before I could find the right words, she was taken away, disappearing into the crowd of men and women passing by without looking back, as if we were mere pieces in the game that no one wanted to play. The weeks that followed were like a storm that never passed. Each day seemed to drag on, and I no longer knew what was real. The heavy work, the relentless routine, it was all an attempt not to think, but at the same time, the pain of separation stayed alive within me, like an open wound that never healed. I kept wondering all the time if she was okay, where she was, what was happening to her, the nights. Then, were even harder. I would lie on the clay floor, looking at the starless sky, asking myself if she was also looking at the same sky and thinking of me. There were, however, moments when something inside me told me that she was out there, somewhere, still alive, still with the same strength she always had. But I didn't know. There was no way of knowing. The system that separated US had made us invisible, even to those who were by our side. The stories of families being torn apart and never reuniting were countless, but each one seemed distant, as if they were happening in another world, not mine. I thought it could be different for us, but reality soon showed me otherwise. My mind, at the time, was not capable of understanding the magnitude of what was happening to us. I couldn't see beyond the immediate pain of separation, but over time, I began to realize that the pain of separation was not something exclusive to my story. It was in everyone else's eyes, in every empty look, in every hopeless gesture. That pain was everywhere, like a cloud that spreads and covers everything around it. Suffering was collective, but at the same time, so lonely. Each of us felt the loss in a unique way, and at the same time, we were all victims of a system that dehumanized us, that took away our right to be whole. Years later, when I was able to find a bit of freedom, my sister's memory was still with me, like a constant presence. But no matter how hard I tried, I never managed to understand what had happened to her. The system that separated us didn't give us answers. It only left us with a void, a lack, a longing that would never be filled. What hurt most was knowing that she, probably, spent her whole life not knowing what had happened to me. And I, in the same way, never knew what happened to her. Today, as I tell this story, I don't do it just to remember the pain I lived through, but to understand something I could never understand. What is it that makes an entire family be torn in half? What makes a child be ripped away from their sister without even the chance of one last hug, one last look? The answer never came, but what remained was the certainty that, despite all the pain, we could never lose our humanity, and more than that, we could never lose the memory of those we loved. I will never forget my sister and her cry. That cry that followed me through life will always be the reminder that, although the separation was cruel, our connection was never lost. At that moment, when I saw my sister being taken away, a strange and heavy feeling overtook me. It was as if time had frozen, but at the same time, it was rushing forward in a way that I could never truly understand. Her gaze, that looked mixed with fear, confusion, and uncertainty, was the last thing I saw before she disappeared into the crowd. The silence that followed was deafening. There was so much noise around me, the men shouting, the chains dragging on the ground, the desperate cries of others who were also being taken. But for me, it was the silence that screamed the loudest. Her cry, though distant, echoed in my head like a drum, but it felt as though the sound never truly reached my heart. I wanted to scream, to run after her, to do anything that would stop the separation from becoming final. But I knew deep down there was nothing more I could do. The pain of loss, when it comes, is something you can never prepare for, and when it hits, words are useless. I felt a deep, crushing pain and an emptiness so vast that, for a fleeting moment, I believed life would never make sense again, that separation wasn't just physical, it tore me apart from within. as though a piece of my very soul had died in that instant. I knew I couldn't go back, couldn't undo what had happened, but the pain consumed me, made me question everything I had ever known. I asked myself every single day if I would ever have the chance to see her again, to apologize for not being able to protect her, to hold her in my arms one last time. But that chance never came, and that pain, that emptiness stayed with me forever, like a weight that I could never put down. Even now, after so many years have passed, I still hear her cry in my mind, echoing through the silence of my memory. It doesn't fade, no matter how much time passes, no matter how hard I try to push it away. Her cry is a part of me, like the shadow that follows me with every step I take. I wonder sometimes if she still remembers me, if she ever thought of me the way I thought of her. Maybe she found a new path, a new life. But what has stayed with me is this painful memory that I can't shake off. I keep going, living my life, but a part of me is still back there, in that field, in that moment, with her cry still echoing in my heart. Maybe this is what life does to us. It takes away a part of us, a vital piece, and never gives us the chance to put it back in its rightful place. So we continue carrying the emptiness, the pain, and the endless echo of what once was. If you feel this, if you understand even a small part of this pain, I ask you, don't forget to stay with me. Subscribe, so I know I'm not alone in carrying this story forward. The days dragged on, each one heavier than the last. The work on the plantation was exhausting, and despite the constant pain, there was something that drove me to keep going. Maybe it was the fear of losing everything that was left of me. Maybe it was the need to believe that somehow I still had control over something, even if it was just a movement of my feet, stepping on the hot, dry earth with every step. There was no rest. The day began before dawn and only ended when the shadows stretched over the field. Food was scarce, and the little we got was never enough to calm the hunger that seemed to consume our very insides. Every meal was a fight, not just for the food, but for the dignity we still tried to hold onto in a place where hunger was not only physical, but emotional. I saw others around me, those who, like me, were part of this harsh life, and I felt a connection that words couldn't explain. We didn't need to speak much. A simple glance, a gesture, was enough for us to know that we were in this fight together. There were moments when, even in the hardest conditions, someone would give us a piece of bread, a word of comfort, and that was all we needed to keep going for another day. But there were also moments when loneliness became unbearable. The loneliness of knowing that there was no one to help us, no one who could see what we truly felt. Everyone around us was just as lost as we were. Each person carried their own burden, their own pain, and in the end, we were all invisible. Sometimes, in the middle of the night's darkness, I allowed myself to close my eyes and remember the times when life seemed simpler. When we were children, before all this, my sister and I ran through the fields, played under the hot sun, dreamed of a future that seemed so far away, but somehow still possible. The smell of wet earth, the sound of the wind in the leaves, all of that was part of a life that seemed to have been taken from us in an instant. I would ask myself, as exhaustion consumed me, if I would ever have something more, something beyond pain, beyond the struggle, something that reminded me of what it really meant to live. But the answers never came. The only sound we heard was that of the chains, the rustling of dry leaves, the sound of dragging footsteps, of exhausted bodies trying to carry on. It was hard to see a future when the present was so oppressive. I saw others around me, those who tried to escape, even if only for a moment, from the cruel reality we lived in. Some would try to sing, others would tell stories of freedom, of something better, of something that existed beyond that plantation. But I knew, deep down, that all of this was just a dream, distant dreams that didn't belong to us, that weren't meant for people like us. But even so, I clung to those stories, like an anchor that kept me from sinking completely. I didn't know what sustained me, if it was the dreams of others or the hope that still existed inside me. Even though small, life on the plantation taught me how to survive, but it also taught me to let go of many things. I learned that resistance wasn't just in the body, but in the mind, in the soul. Physical pain, I learned to endure, but the pain of the soul that I didn't know how to deal with. Sometimes I wondered if one day anything would be different, if one day there would be a real chance to escape that invisible prison that surrounded us. I knew it wouldn't be easy. I knew the system was there, strong and unbeatable, ready to crush anyone who tried to fight. But still, there was something inside me that told me I couldn't just give up. Even though life had taken so much from me, I still had the right to fight for what was left. Not much, but still, something that kept me going. Something that told me that, although the path was hard, there was something beyond the pain, beyond the struggle. I still believed, even if just for a moment, that freedom was more than just a dream. Pain never truly goes away, no matter how much time passes. It always finds a way to return, to take root deep in a man's soul. When the separation happened, I didn't know if I could hold on. Like a tree pulled from its roots, I felt empty, without ground, lost. All I knew was that I couldn't stop fighting. I couldn't let myself give in to the pain, because if I did, I would have lost everything. The plantation, that prison of mud and iron, never left me. Every piece of earth beneath my feet reminded me of everything we had lost. But no matter how hard I tried to ignore it, there was something inside me that didn't want to stop believing. Something kept telling me that, even in all this darkness, there was still a spark of light. Maybe it wasn't immediate freedom, but I still believed that something could change. Asterisk in the hardest moments, when my thoughts felt like they were suffocating me. When my eyes were dry from crying, I would look up at the stars. It was like they, so far and untouchable, held within them all the hopes we had lost. I wondered if, up there, somewhere beyond where my eyes could reach, there were others like me. Were they also enslaved by the same cruel fate? Or were they, finally, free? The sky was my only comfort. There, alone, I felt part of something bigger, as if, somehow, everyone's struggle was shared in those stars. I clung to that thought because without it, what would remain? Without the hope that something could change, that one day we would be free, what else was there to do but wait for death to come? But death didn't come, and I, not fully understanding why, kept on fighting. Asterisk, that's when I realized that hope, although fragile, never truly dies. It transforms. Sometimes it hides in the smallest things, in the simplest gestures, in the words that go unsaid but hang in the air, waiting to be heard. I saw it in a look, in a smile that lasted less than a second but made all the difference. I saw hope in the callous hands of others, in the silent resistance of those who, like me, still had something to protect, something to live for. And I realized that, despite everything, we weren't truly alone. There was something in us, in each one of us, that refused to disappear. And maybe that was the only thing that really mattered. Not immediate freedom, not the chance to escape, but the strength that kept us together. Even when everything around us tried to tear us apart. Asterisk, I learned, in that dark place, that hope doesn't depend on what happens around you. It comes from within, from something that can't be touched but remains firm. Life on the plantation taught me how to survive, but it also taught me that, in the end, the fight isn't just for what you can reach, but for what you refuse to lose. And I refuse to lose hope, no matter how much the pain tried to drag me down. I refuse to be defeated by the cruelty of the system, by the violence that tried to define me. I knew that, deep down, true freedom wasn't just about escaping physically, but about staying whole, resisting in mind and spirit. And as long as there's something inside me, something that refuses to give up, I will keep fighting. Life, no matter how much we tried, was never fair. Those who tried to understand our pain, those who looked at us with some humanity, could do nothing but offer empty words. There was no way to remove the pain we felt inside, no way to restore what was lost. The years went by, and I remained trapped in the memory of that last look from my sister, the last goodbye that never had a chance to be said, the last touch of her hands that I could never feel. Every day that passed was an extra weight on my shoulders. The emptiness she left in my life became a shadow that never left me. I never fully understood the separation. How can someone be torn from their family, their childhood, their soul, and keep living? How is it possible to go on when the only thing left is the longing for what is gone? Time doesn't heal wounds. It only teaches you how to live with them. Sometimes, I catch myself looking at the sky, as I did in the hardest moments, and I wonder if she ever thought of me, if she still remembered that last moment, that last time our eyes met. I believed that somewhere, maybe she was looking at the same stars I was, but over time, even that thought began to fade. The stars no longer brought me comfort. The only comfort left was the idea that she hadn't been forgotten. I refused to let her memory be erased by the cruelty of the system that separated us. I couldn't let her become just another lost story in those fields. She was my sister, and although the world tried to tear us apart, a part of us would always be together. I knew that the pain would never leave me. That longing, that emptiness, would always be with me. But deep inside, I also knew that our story, our struggle, could never be forgotten. I knew that as long as I was alive, my sister wouldn't be lost. I would carry her with me, with every step, with every breath, because her memory and the love I still held for her was the last thing no one could take from me. It was the only thing that still made sense, the only thing that, despite everything, gave me the strength to keep moving forward. When the end comes and all that remains is the memory, the only thing I hope for is to look to that place and know that, somehow, my sister will still be there, by my side, in spirit. And when the stars shine once again, I hope to feel her presence, like a last goodbye, a goodbye that, finally, can be said. I've reached the point where words begin to fade, where memory and pain mix so much that I no longer know where one starts and the other ends. The fight for freedom, for dignity, for a better future, it never ended. The fight continues inside me, even when the body has no strength left to go on. I believe the true fight isn't for what we can touch or see, but for what remains within us. What can never be stolen, what belongs only to us. It's our essence, our story, our pain. I live to tell this, so that we would never be forgotten. Even if the fight never ends, our story will be told as long as there's someone willing to listen. Every step we took, every tear shed, it was all a silent scream against oppression, against being erased. Every piece of us still lives in those who dare to remember. Sometimes, the pain we feel seems like it will never pass, but maybe true healing isn't about forgetting, it's about continuing to live, carrying with us the memories of those who are gone, and not letting the story fade. I know the pain will accompany me to the end, and maybe it's the only thing that will never leave. But deep down, deep inside, it is mine, and no one can take it from me. Maybe that's what keeps me alive, the fact that, despite everything, the pain still reminds me of who I am, of who we were. I know the words will fade over time, but the truth will never disappear. I hope that by hearing my story, you will remember me, us, everything we were forced to endure. And I hope, with all my heart, that you will remember every step we took, every tear we shed, and carry it with you, just as I do, because the fight never ends. It only passes to those who have the courage to listen, to continue, to keep the story alive. If you've stayed with me this long, if you've heard my story, then I ask, kindly, that you stay a little longer. Subscribe if you feel the weight of this story, and listen to the others, too. There's more to be told, and I hope you'll hear it.